Before takeout and microwaves, supper on the Lower East Side meant rye bread, potatoes, and slow pots made from whatever you had. These meals carried Jewish families through crowded tenements and tight budgets, leaving memories worth keeping. Here are 25 forgotten Elise dinners no one makes anymore today. 1. Cholent, Sabbath stew. A deep pot holds beans, barley, potatoes, and a small cut of meat, built on Friday and left to go low and slow so it's waiting warm without anyone touching a flame. The neighborhood bakery or a shared basement oven keeps steady heat through the night. Staples make the body of the meal. A little meat lends richness, and the long cook turns everything mellow. It honored Sabbath rules, stretched a budget, and used the block's communal resources the way tenement life required. After services, the lid lifts, steam rises, and a room full of quiet hunger turns into rest, ritual, and enough for everyone. 2. Rye bread with schmaltz onions. Thick-cut rye lands on the table and takes a light spread of saved chicken fat, the kind rendered from a week's roasting and cooled to a soft gloss, then topped with chopped onion and a shake of pepper. It's quick, filling, and proudly plain. In kosher homes where butter stayed with dairy, schmaltz did the work of both flavor and fuel, and nothing from the bird was wasted. Loaves came from the corner bakery, onions from the pushcart, the rest from careful saving. One slice tasted like steadiness, the kind of weekday supper that didn't apologize and didn't need more than a pickle on the side. 3. Schmaltz herring with boiled potatoes. From the barrel at an appetizing shop to a small kitchen bowl, salt-cured herring gets rinsed, sliced, and paired with warm potatoes, and a few thin rings of onion, maybe a drizzle of oil if the bottle isn't empty. The flavors are assertive and satisfying. Herring kept without ice traveled well and brought protein to a tight budget. Potatoes balanced the salt and turned a plate into a meal. Tenement families knew its value and its comfort. Around a crowded table, this was a steady weeknight answer. Salty, sustaining, and shared without ceremony, the kind of dish that finished with bread to catch the last shine. 4. Beet borscht, dairy supper. A pot of beets and onion turns the water ruby, then becomes either a warm bowl in cool months or a chilled one when the windows are open, finished with a spoon of sour cream and a slice of dark bread. It's simple, bright, and refreshing. Beets were affordable and always on the pushcarts, and a dairy supper kept the kitchen kosher without meat. The color lifted narrow rooms, the tang cut long days. Dill or a squeeze of lemon if available made it sing. For many families, borscht was both memory and relief, a familiar bowl that traveled easily across generations and seasons. 5. Kasha varnishkes. Toasted buckwheat groats turn nutty in the pan, then mingle with bow tie noodles and soft onions until the whole thing tastes warm and grounded, a dish that sits between side and supper without asking permission. It's humble, sturdy, and generous. Buckwheat was cheap on the carts, noodles stretched the pot, and onions tied everything together. A spoon of oil or saved fat made it richer when possible. The bowl suited long shifts and short pay, reheated well, and fed lunch the next day from a wrapped tin. After a hard day, this was the plate that steadied the room, simple food with a quiet backbone. 6. Potato Knishes, pushcart style. Golden and warm in a paper sleeve, the niche carries mashed potato and onion inside a thin baked dough, a street supper that fits the hand and fills the evening. Dough rolls out on a floured board, gets a line of seasoned potato, then folds, seals, and bakes until the seams turn glossy and the corners toast. A smear of mustard happens right there on the curb, or at a kitchen table minutes later. Pushcarts kept them hot for pennies. At home, the same pantry basics, flour, potato, onion, made a tray that stretched through the week. The smell drifted down stairwells and followed children up tenement steps. Knishes were cheap, portable, and beloved, the LES answer when pay was light and time was shorter still. You could carry one to a night shift or split it with a friend at the kitchen window. It was practical food with a little pride baked in, proof that a careful hand and simple ingredients could make something that tasted like luck on an ordinary day. 7. Cabbage soup, kapusniak, meatless or with bits. A pot of cabbage, onion, and root vegetables simmers until the broth turns sweet savory, and the whole building seems to breathe easier. Some cooks dropped in a bone for depth if one was around. Others kept it meatless and bright, letting pepper and patience do the heavy lifting. Cabbage kept well in cool cellars and cost little on the carts, and a head could stretch across several suppers. The method was forgiving: slice, simmer, and share. A loaf of black bread or a heel of rye stood nearby to catch the last spoonfuls. In crowded rooms where space and coins ran thin, this soup made time feel softer, steam fogging the window while talk settled into small, easy things. A child might get the first bowl, an elder might get the last. It was a pot big enough to share, a scent that meant someone had thought ahead, and a reminder that relief can be simple: heat, salt, and care in the same ladle. 8. Stuffed cabbage, varnishkes. Par-cooked cabbage leaves lie open like green hands, ready to hold a spoon of rice and a little meat before they roll into neat bundles and settle into a sweet sour or tomato sauce to finish slowly. A small amount of ground beef or veal stretches far when partnered with rice. Cabbage costs little and cooperates. Time and steady heat do the rest. The pot sounds like comfort: quiet bubbles, soft thumps, and the room smells like a holiday even when it's a weekday. Families saved this dish for gatherings and also brought it to the middle of the week when someone needed cheering. It's thrift wrapped like a gift, each roll set gently beside the next so none splits. The first bite is tender and tangy, a wave of memory for anyone who ever watched leaves blanch and drain over a sink. Stuffed cabbage carried home with it patience, careful hands, and the sweetness of making something special from what a budget could bear. 9. Gefilte fish. A careful cook grinds scraps of carp, whitefish, or pike with onion and seasonings, shapes the mixture into ovals, and poaches them in a rich fish stock until set and delicate, later serving them chilled with a ribbon of beet horseradish. Appetizing shops sold trimmings. Fishmongers saved bones for stock. Nothing went to waste. The technique respected kosher rhythms, fish standing apart from both meat and dairy, and turned humble pieces into a centerpiece. It took work: grinding, skimming, tasting for balance, and letting the broth do its quiet magic. On Shabbat tables across the Lower East Side, the platter arrived like a promise, pale ovals glistening, a small luxury earned by patience. Each bite tasted clean and slightly sweet, then woke up under the horseradish. It was tradition you could hold with a fork, food that taught the difference between simple and plain. In crowded rooms, it made space for celebration. In lean weeks, it still felt like honor. 10. Chicken soup with matzo balls. One chicken becomes a pot that lasts. Bones and back pieces roll into a simmer with onion, carrot, and celery until the broth turns clear and golden. Then light matzo dumplings poach gently until they float like soft promises. A few coins worth of bird, managed with care, stretches across days, and the dumplings make it feel abundant. Every kitchen had its secrets: how long to simmer, how to keep the broth bright, how loose to make the batter so the matzo balls land tender, not heavy. The soup arrived for Sabbath, for holidays, and for any week when someone needed comfort. It's the LES kind of medicine: warming hands, clearing heads, steadying a house with scent alone. A thin slice of carrot, a sprig of dill if fortune allowed, and suddenly the bowl felt like celebration. People called it Jewish penicillin with a smile, but the truth was simpler. It tasted like care, and it worked. 11. Noodle Kugel, Kugel, dairy. Oven doors open to a pan of glossy noodles set into a gentle custard, steam slipping out like a promise. Cooked lakshan get tossed with cottage cheese or farmer cheese, beaten egg, and sautéed onion for savory nights, or a handful of raisins and a touch of sweetness when the table calls for it. Then everything bakes until the top freckles and the corners turn tender. Pantry noodles and dairy made a full meatless supper that kept kitchens kosher and budgets steady, and the leftovers sliced clean for the next day's lunch. Kugel felt like kindness you could cut with a spatula, soft, comforting, and sturdy enough to pass around twice. Children loved its mild warmth. Elders loved how far one pan could go. In narrow rooms and crowded hallways, this was the sound of forks quieting a long day. the taste of home baked into every strand, proof that a small grocery list could still deliver a big, shared sigh of relief. 12. Potato. Kugel. Grated potatoes, onion, and a little fat meet a hot oven and come back bronzed, crackling at the edges and tender in the middle. The kind of bake that makes neighbors guess what floor it's on just by the smell. The method is simple and ambitious at once. Grate, mix, spread, and bake until the top catches the light and the bottom releases with a proud sizzle. Potatoes were plentiful and cheap. One pan could anchor supper and appear again at breakfast with a fried egg or a spoon of applesauce if fortune smiled. This was bake once, eat twice, the tenement version of planning ahead. Nobody argued over the corner pieces. They disappeared first. The rest cut into squares that stacked neatly on a plate and waited for whoever came late from a shift. It was the pan everyone scraped, a proudly rustic dish that didn't need meat to feel complete. Proof that thrift and heat could turn a root cellar staple into something close to celebration. 13. Chopped liver on rye onions sizzle until sweet. Then meat chicken livers in the pan before both are minced with hard-cooked egg into a spread that chills and sets, ready to go thick on seeded rye. It's rich without pretending, a payday treat that can step in as supper when the week ran long. This plate respected the whole bird, nothing wasted, while keeping to kosher rhythms and a tight budget. Delis sold it by the quarter pound. Home cooks made their own and let it rest until the flavors married. A slice of rye, a knife's worth of chopped liver, maybe a pickle on the side, and the day softened its voice. People gathered around the board to taste just a little, then stayed for another piece because it felt generous and familiar. In small kitchens where space was short, this was luxury measured in savor rather than cost, a sandwich that carried pride and practicality on the same loaf. 14. Kishke, stuffed derma. A cook blends grated onion with breadcrumbs or flour, schmaltz and spice into a fragrant stuffing, then packs it tight and bakes it until the outside browns and the inside turns plush, or slips the roll into a simmering stew where gravy paints every slice. Cheap grains and rendered fat made flavor possible when coins were careful, and kishke turned a pot of vegetables or a small roast into a feast by sheer depth. The perfume was unmistakable. Peppery, toasty, slightly sweet from onion, the kind of smell that pulled people to the table before the plates were set. Sliced thick, it ate like a side and a treat at once, a Sabbath favorite that taught how humble parts become something memorable with time and heat. In families that counted everything, kishke was proof that thrift and tradition could share the same seat, delivering comfort that lasted from the first cut to the last swipe of bread through the pan. 16. Tzimmes, carrot prune stew. Carrots cut into coins slide into a pot with prunes or apricots and a little fat, then simmer low until the sauce turns glossy and the fruit softens the edges of the day. Sometimes a few dumplings or a bit of meat slips in for depth, but the heart is sweet carrot and gentle spice. Dried fruit kept well on pantry shelves and stretched sweetness without costing much, so a family could pour a holiday taste into a weekday evening. The method is patience. Stir now and then, watch the shine arrive, and let the room fill with a comfort that's more about warmth than sugar. Tzimmes felt like a reward you made for yourselves, a memory of festival tables brought down to the price of root vegetables and a handful of prunes. On the Lower East Side, it told children that celebration wasn't only for big days. It lived in the steady simmer, the soft bite, the kind color in the bowl, a quiet joy, spooned out generously. 17. Barley mushroom soup. Krupnik. Onions sweat in the bottom of a pot until they turn sweet and pale. Then barley goes in with water and thyme, thickening slowly into comfort. Mushrooms, market-bought or dried, join near the end, bringing a woodsy roundness that makes the broth feel older than it is. Grains filled bowls cheaply and well. Mushrooms added depth without leaning on meat, perfect for cold months and careful budgets. Ladled into heavy mugs or chipped bowls, Krupnik steadied hands and softened tempers after long hours at machines or counters. The soup didn't ask for attention, it gave it. One pot fed a crowd, reheated kindly, and left a film of warmth on windows that said the building would be all right tonight. Bread scraped the side so nothing was lost. In kitchens where every coin had a job, Krupnik proved that steady nourishment could be built from patience, barley, and a few dark slices, a lesson older than the block and exactly right for it. 18. Bialy with whitefish salad. A warm bialy, chewy with a crater of sweet onion at its center, meets a spread of whitefish salad that's smoky, creamy, and proud of the appetizing counter it came from. The assembly is simple. Toast if you can, smear generously, add a ring of onion if you like. For meatless evenings, appetizing shops kept dairy and fish ready, paid for by a day's labor and eaten with quiet pleasure. The bialy was the LE's cousin to the bagel, easier on the budget and rich with bakery perfume. Whitefish salad turned it from bread to supper. This was a signature bite of the neighborhood, humble luxury in the language of pushcarts and small treats. You could eat it standing at a window or share halves across a tiny table. It tasted like the block itself, smoke from the ovens, onion from the air, and the feeling that you belonged to a place where small things, done well, meant a lot. 19. Bagels with lox cream cheese, occasional treat. A boiled then baked bagel with a firm glossy crust gets split, given a cool layer of cream cheese, and dressed with ribbons of smoked salmon laid thin. Maybe a caper or a slice of onion if fortune smiles. Maybe just the basics when payday has already promised itself elsewhere. This wasn't nightly fare. It was a treat that said the week had turned a corner. Appetizing stores kept the salmon and the schmear. The bakery kept the bagels coming hot to paper bags. A family kept an eye on the prices before stepping in. The first bite lands silky and salty, the kind of luxury measured in slices, not stacks. On the Lower East Side, it felt proudly New York, ocean and city meeting on a small round bread. You ate slower, you tasted carefully, and you remembered that even on narrow streets, celebration fit in the hand, then disappeared with a smile you didn't need to explain. 20. Gribenes with potatoes. Onions, chicken skin, and onion render low and slow until the kitchen smells toasted and the bits turn crisp. Then hot potatoes join the pan to catch every drop and carry the flavor further than it should be able to go. The method is thrift taught by care. Use every part, cook it properly, share it generously. In households that saved schmaltz in jars, gribenes were the cook's little treasure, a crunchy reward folded into a cheap plate to make it shine. Potatoes and onions were always around. This treatment made them feel like more. The sound, a soft crackle under the spoon, brought faces to the doorway. Served right away while the edges still snapped, it brightened a dull evening and turned leftovers into something to talk about. On the LES, it tasted like resourcefulness with a wink, proof that economy and pleasure could share a skillet, and that wisdom learned at the stove could stretch a table further than money ever did. Up next, the deli counter, the pickle barrel, and the oven bakes that turned crowded tenements into warm, unforgettable kitchens. 21. Pickle plate from the barrel. A shared plate lands with half sours, full sours, and a tangle of kraut, flanked by rye bread and a cut onion. The look is simple, the taste is bright and bracing. A hand dips into brine, pulls pickles from the barrel, drains them quick, and piles them high so everyone can reach. Kraut gets lifted with tongs, its tang waking the room before the first bite. Barrels lined Hester and Orchard Streets, sold by the piece for pennies, and turned a cheap supper into something lively. Bread stretched the plate, onion sharpened it, the crunch reset tired palates after soft stews and slow pots. This wasn't a main, yet it completed the table again and again, especially when money carried more month than meat. Around small plates and chipped cups, the snap and zing stirred talk and appetite at once. The meaning was bigger than cucumbers and cabbage. It was contrast, company, and the LES pleasure of adding one bright, shared thing that made everything else taste more like itself. 22. Egg barley, farfel, with onions gravy. A pan toasts tiny egg dough pellets until they turn fragrant. Then they simmer to tenderness and fold through sweet onions, finishing with a spoon of pan drippings that make the whole bowl hum. The shapes are small, the comfort is large. Farfel kept on shelves without fuss and cooked fast after long days. On weeks when a roast was modest, the gravy it left behind found new life here, catching in the nooks and carrying flavor from a little to a lot. The method was direct and forgiving. Toast, simmer, stir, moisten. A sprinkle of pepper, a breath of steam, and suddenly the room felt friendlier. Families loved farfel because it was a side that could eat like supper, big on warmth and easy to pass. For children, it was fun and familiar. For elders, it tasted like good sense. In kitchens where every scrap counted, this dish proved that thrift and care could meet in the middle and send everyone from the table steady, content, and ready for tomorrow. 23. Pletzel, onion board. A baker stretches dough into a thin board, scatters sweet onion and poppy seed, and slides it into heat until the surface blisters and the edges char just enough to sing. It comes out fragrant and glossy, sliced into squares that go further than you'd expect. Pletzel lived on bakery shelves as a staple you could share, a cheap slice that fed two and slipped perfectly beside soup or tea. The method wastes nothing. Onions already on hand, dough that rises while the shop works, an oven that never sleeps. On cold evenings, the smell drifted down narrow streets like a promise. On warm afternoons, it followed you home like friendly footsteps. This wasn't celebration bread, but it felt like a small kindness after a long shift. People wrapped a piece in paper, tucked it under an arm, and walked faster because the onion called. Neighborhood perfume, some said, sweet toasty warmth that made a tenement hallway feel a size bigger. Pletzel was the taste of the block itself, practical, generous, and better when shared. 4. Pastrami on rye with mustard. Seeded rye opens to steam. A deli man lifts a slab of pastrami from the steamer, slices it thin so the fat turns silky, and stacks it high before laying on sharp mustard and pressing the bread just enough to hold. The build looks simple. The craft is real. Delicatessens fed workers late, and on payday the line felt like a parade of tired feet turning into taller shoulders. A shared sandwich stretched far. One plate, two halves, careful bites, plenty of napkins. The why is city logic, smoke and spice from the cure, warmth from the steam, a sandwich that fixed a long week in 6 minutes. Rye and mustard set the stage, pastrami did the speech. Pride lived here too. New York between bread, made by hands that knew what they were doing. The first bite made people close their eyes. The last bite made them promise to come back. It was a supper that said you belonged, salty smoke and city heart passing from counter to table like a handshake. 25. Stewed fruit compote with tea bread. Dried fruit slips into a pot with water, a little sugar, and lemon peel, then simmers until the pieces swell and soften, and the syrup turns gentle. Served warm or cool with black tea and a slice of rye, it's dessert without extravagance and comfort without apology. Dried fruit kept well in cupboards and on hooks, ready for weeks when fresh was dear. A small handful could sweeten a whole evening. The method is quiet work. Time, patience, a slow bubble, a careful stir. Compote closed a table kindly after sharp pickles or salty fish, soothing tongues and tempers at once. It invited talk, the easy, end-of-day kind, and gave children a sweet that felt special but sensible. In tenements where noise traveled, this was the whisper after the chorus, the soft finish to a hard day. Tea cooled, bread caught the last syrup, and the room held onto warmth a minute longer. The meaning was simple and lasting. Enough sweetness to remember and enough gentleness to sleep. A century ago, Lower East Side kitchens balanced belief, budget, and the block. Kosher rules shaped the rhythm of the week, meat days, dairy nights, Sabbath rest, while pushcarts, bakeries, and appetizing shops filled narrow streets with barrels, loaves, and small luxuries. Long simmered pots stretched tougher cuts. Pickling, brining, and baking preserved abundance and softened scarcity. Tenement stoves and shared ovens turned efficiency into an art form, and almost nothing was wasted. Across these tables, the line between main and side blurred until it didn't matter. Bread spread with schmaltz counted as supper. Pickles were punctuation for every plate. Soups, kugels, and casseroles fed whole floors without recipes or fuss. Fish and dairy carried the weekdays. Meat marked milestones or payday. Sabbath meant Cholent waiting warm after services. The food was frugal, but it carried pride, deep flavor, quiet ingenuity, and the warmth of people who knew how to share what they had. This isn't nostalgia for hardship. It's respect for families who turned modest means into memory and belonging. These suppers built community out of proximity, generosity, and the smell of something good from a few doors down. If these dinners stirred your memory or sparked curiosity, tell someone your family's Lower East Side dish, or try one from the list and let it gather your table tonight. And if you'd like more people-first food history from real lives and real streets, stay with us. Historical best effort, sources noted in description, vintage cookbooks, newspapers, oral histories, archives.